I actually have a rule in my house. It's blood, bone, vomit, fire, flood, zombie.
Welcome to the Mind.
What do we really mean by genius?
Matters.
Giftedness is so much more than an academic label.
Podcast.
We tend to think of gifted as kids being good at everything across the board.
An exploration of giftedness.
Originals are nonconformists.
Creativity.
People who not only have new ideas.
Intelligence.
They're the people you want to bet on.
In childhood.
I like to learn about things, but I like to learn my way.
And beyond. This is the Mind Matters Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 33. On this episode, we'll be talking about taking care of yourself. Good parenting doesn't have a fixed definition because it varies, because kids are all different. But one thing about parenting is that there's never a dull moment, even if you would do anything for just one single dull moment. Jen Torbeck Merrill is our guest, and we're going to talk about ways to take care of ourselves as much as we take care of our kids. She's also a homeschooling parent, so if you've ever considered homeschooling your kids, I think you'll find a lot of good information in this interview. Stay with us, because all of that is just ahead. One of the more interesting parts of having a podcast is interacting with listeners, and there are several different ways that you can do that. You can find us on Facebook and Insta. We are Mind Matters Podcast, or you can find us on Twitter @MindMattersPod. But if you forget all of that, just remember mindmatterspodcast.com. When you go there, you can interact with us. You can find links to all of our social media pages. You can click to subscribe via your favorite podcast platform. You can search all of our past episodes by subject or keyword. You can listen to any episode, or you can make a donation to help defray the cost of doing the podcast. Once again, it's mindmatterspodcast.com.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Seems we're almost ready to talk with our guest.
This is Jen Merrill from Laughing at Chaos and author of If This Is a Gift, Can I Send It Back?
Don't go anywhere.
If what you hear on Mind Matters makes a difference to you and your family, consider becoming a supporter. Through patreon.com, you can chip in to help defray the cost of producing this podcast. Just decide how much you'd like to contribute, and that amount will be placed on your credit card every month. Even a couple of bucks would help cover the cost of producing the podcast and help us promote it to new listeners who could also use our help. Go to patreon.com/mindmatters and become a patron. And thanks for making a difference.
We're really happy to have Jen Merrill with us today. She's the creator of LaughingAtChaos.com and author of the book, If This Is a Gift, Can I Send It Back? I should mention she's also a keynote speaker at the 2019 SENG National Conference this July in Houston, Texas. She's a really creative writer, but you might also call her a self-care expert. Jen, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Before we jump into talking about self-care, let's start out by telling everyone about your background,
Okay.
how you're connected to the gifted and twice exceptional world, and what led you down the path to today.
It started, 14 or so years ago. Well, it all started, when we were drop kicked into the deep end of the pool by our own twice exceptional son. Should have known right off the bat that there was something unusual about him because at 2 weeks, he's holding his head up and he's looking around, and people are always commenting at how bright-eyed and inquisitive he was as an infant. Mm-hmm. But he was about 4, and we couldn't figure out why this kid was so hard. I mean, I babysat and worked daycare centers, and I've been a teacher since I was 12. So I've had a lot of students and a lot of kids around, and this kid was like nothing I'd ever seen. And I talked to a friend, and she said, he sounds a lot like my son. You might want to investigate Gifted. And I thought that was hysterical. But we were living outside of Denver at the time, and we went and had him evaluated at the Gifted Development Center. To show you just how nothing I knew, I had to actually Google Colorado Gifted to find anything resembling help. And lo and behold, there was this great center down the road. He was evaluated when he was 4, which is about as early as you could go. And we learned that funky new word, twice exceptional. And I still, even to this day, will go back and read the evaluation when I need to remind myself that, yeah, he really is this way. I'm not making it up, or it's not this, that, or the other thing. And learn that, you can be extraordinarily bright and still have all these other things that make life just so hard for you and for your family. And it was a learning experience for all of us, and still is. Now that he's 18 and we're starting to look, towards the future of other things, we're learning stuff every day, and it's never a dull moment around here.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's kind of like It's just a newer version or a different version of what's going on. And people really don't understand what that is like.
Right.
As a parent or I think as a kid going through it either.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's like that vortex of learning, you learn when you're in education school, where you start off small and then, as years go on, you always kind of circle back and revisit things. And there's some truth to that. I mean, I thought for sure, okay, we got to a good point. Phew, okay, things are calmer now. That's in the past. And then it'll show up in like a different form, like wearing a Halloween costume. And it's just it's the same issue. It's just dressed differently. It's the bad disguise of a mustache and a monocle. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily respond to the same reactions or coping mechanisms and things, which makes it really frustrating.
One of the big tips that people will say is, well, when you want your child to do something, give them two options. They can either do this or they can do that. And so my little one, who's not quite 4 yet, I started doing that. I'm like, well, do you want mommy to take you to bed tonight, or do you want daddy to take you to bed tonight? And he looks at me and he goes, Cooper, which is the dog. And so he's like, I'm not falling for that, and I'm sure that you've kind of been through that too.
Very much so. And it got to the point where I finally just threw away all the parenting books and, burned all the magazines and things. I don't even read them. I don't acknowledge them. They're for the wide middle of society and culture. And gifted families and twice exceptional families are way over on one side, or if they're super lucky, they're dancing on both sides of that bell curve. Mm-hmm. And so the middle doesn't help. I mean, if anything, it makes it more difficult to parent. And, I wish there was something out there that was expressly for, families of gifted and twice exceptional kids that was mainstream media. Just so that, all the other parents can say, oh, well, this isn't that weird. It's just, different kind of wiring. It's a different kind of kid.
So as I've been reading about the decisions that you and your family have made along the way, one of the things I noticed is that you haven't shied away from making some pretty big changes. One of those is homeschooling. Did you guys start in public school and then switch over to homeschooling?
Yeah, he started actually in a charter school. Out in Colorado, the educational options there was an overabundance of educational options for quirky kids out there. So he started in a charter school that was core knowledge, which is, what your first grader should know, what your second grader should know. That book series. And he thrived because, like in the first grade, they're studying about Gilgamesh. I'm like, you're studying about what now? It was very intracurricular. Things were connected from class to class, and it was small and it was intimate. But it was also a half hour away. Mm. And so I'm in a carpool with him and 2 other kindergartners. So it was kindergarten, first grade. And I've got his little baby brother. And I'm like, I'm tired of this driving. And there was a lot going on with where's the school actually going to end up? Because it was a new school and it was an office building. And over our back fence, they're building the new elementary school for the school district, the public elementary. Okay, so that's super. Oh, it's going to be the district's gifted and talented elementary school over my back fence. Mm. He ended up going there, and it was okay. It actually was better than okay. It was, they had cluster grouping. I'm a huge fan of cluster grouping, and I know a lot of people are not, but for gifted kids, even in a gifted, quote unquote, gifted school, there's still outliers there, and being with other kids that are similarly wired within a classroom is glorious. So it had cluster grouping, it had pullouts, it had all sorts of things.
Right.
And we were there for a few years, and then we decided to move to Illinois. Illinois has squat when it comes to gifted education.
Right.
It's the great vast wasteland, unfortunately. There is no funding. I mean, quite literally zero funding. The definition is practically high achieving. Colorado actually has twice exceptional in the state's definition of giftedness.
Yeah, they're pretty progressive with the gifted and 2E stuff.
Yeah, you don't realize how good you got it until you leave. We were told before he even started school in our new district that he would not be in the gifted program. He didn't qualify. And unfortunately, I was told this right in front of him. So even before school started, my son heard, "You're stupid," because he was in the gifted program in his school in Colorado. So he lasted about 3 months in the school. At the time the district had its gifted program, all the elementary kids in the gifted program met at one school. So he didn't even have any similarly wired peers in his school. So he was miserable. And I wrote about it some in my book, If This Is a Gift, Can I Send It Back? And it was some of the darkest, hardest days of my life. You know, the kind of night when you're sobbing yourself to sleep and actually wake up your husband, you know, for the shaking of the bed. It was that kind of fun. As soon as we told him, okay, we're going to homeschool you, the anxiety evaporated off of him like fog. There were no other options. It was public school or homeschool. And so we homeschooled him. And that was 7 years ago. And he is a graduating senior now. He is easing into collegiate life. He's going to be taking some classes still with a gifted co-op in this area, and taking college classes. And with the hopes that in a couple of years, we can drop kick him off somewhere to school or off to work. I love this kid, but boy, howdy.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to see him succeed and thrive on his own. I just know it's going to be a slow to launch, and that's fine.
And the intensity is it just doesn't end.
No, it does not end. It just changes shape and color and flavor and aroma. But it's always there because, I mean, that's his wiring. He's just intense, and that's okay. The best thing I ever did was go, well, I know you're not going to listen to me. I've tried. I've tried to teach you for years. I know you're not going to listen to me, but I can't listen to you. So we're going to listen to each other, and we're going to do this side by side. I'm going to follow your lead. You're going to listen to my suggestions. We're going to do this as a team. Because he was late 5th grade by the time we pulled him. And that was the best thing for him. We got to work at his pace. He listened to my suggestions. I followed his lead, and we went and did it side by side, and it's been fantastic. I kind of regret not having done it earlier, but I wasn't ready. There was no way I could have homeschooled him earlier. I wasn't ready.
People constantly underestimate their own role as parents in their kids' education.
What I try to impress upon parents is that no matter where your child gets an education or how they're educated, you are in charge of that education. Not the teachers, not the school, not the administration. You are in charge of it. And we all forget that. We all just go, okay, my kid's at school. He's in their hands now. Well, you're still in charge.
Let's dig into your homeschooling journey a little bit more specifically. I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Let's start with the good. What are the good things about homeschooling that you've experienced?
Sure. The good is that totally got to go at his pace and his interests. He got to have a very personalized education, exactly what he needed. And we were lucky in that respect. He is a very, very computer tech focused young man. He's won awards for it and is going to be wildly successful. So homeschooling allowed him to build and have in our basement basically a server farm. People keep giving him equipment and he's like, yeah, I can do this, and makes it work.
Cool.
He actually at one point went digging through a bin of old computer parts that I had forgotten we had stuck away and found everything to an old netbook that had been basically torn apart. He put it all back together and it worked. He was 12.
Wow.
10, I don't know, really, really stinking young. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
He was seen by a local photojournalist at a library program, and the photojournalist actually did a photo series article on him and his computer tech skills and how he can do all this. And he's all entirely self-taught.
Yeah.
So that's been the good. The good is that he can follow his passions. We can tailor the education that I know he needs to have with those passions. And so, and go at his pace. And that has been the best part of the whole thing.
All right. Well, let's dig into the bad. What are the drawbacks of homeschooling?
Yeah, the drawbacks to homeschooling. I basically said sayonara to anything resembling a career.
That's huge.
It's huge. And I don't even do a lot of the hands-on homeschooling anymore. I mean, I hire out a lot. I'm practically a general contractor more than anything. He's got an online math teacher, he's got an online writing teacher, and he goes to our district's tech campus for his computer systems dual enrollment class. He's got a gifted teenager co-op that he's involved in. So having a quote unquote real career was pretty much flushed the second we said, okay, we're going to homeschool you. In fact, I had just started a job. 3 months into the job, I had to quit because I'm like, my kid is drowning in school and we're pulling him to homeschool. So that was one of the big ones of the bad, is just the downside to homeschooling. And yes, you absolutely can work and homeschool at the same time. I've taught flute lessons for the last 7 years, but it's not like a job with benefits and, a reliable salary sort of thing. I know also there are gaps in his education that he wouldn't have necessarily had he gone to the public school. So I know he's got gaps, but then I also figure everybody's got gaps in their education somewhere. They will be filled in. And because I didn't try to shove it down his throat, they'll be filled in more quickly. And I guarantee he's going to remember things better because he did it on his own terms. In the Chicago area, there is an organization called Homeschooling Gifted Students, HSGS, and we got involved with them pretty early on. It was a group of homeschooling gifted kids, and there's a co-op. Oh my God. And we lived at that co-op every Friday for like 3, 4, 5 years. And then it had an offshoot of the Teen Learning Lab of Chicago, where it's an interdisciplinary co-op, and they take college level classes, and it's fantastic. Without those sort of resources, we would have been very, very isolated. And I know that can be homeschooling a gifted kid can be extremely isolating because there's not many of them. And there's not many of them being homeschooled. And so it can be very lonely for the parents. And we were just so very, very fortunate.
Yeah. All right. Well, what about the ugly? What are the things that people might not even expect about homeschooling?
It involves the whole family in one way or another. So we homeschool one. His younger brother goes off to school. So they're both high schoolers now. And I don't have it in me to homeschool both of them at the same time. When they're both home in the evenings and they're arguing, they're basically being brothers, and they're roughhousing and calling each other names. If I had to deal with that all day long, I would not handle that well. Homeschooling, especially homeschooling a gifted or twice exceptional quirky kid, can affect the whole family. Because I'm not working, finances are tight. And, these kids are expensive. It's not like they have low cost hobbies. But it affects the whole family, and it can affect your marriage if you're not careful. Where one person is working all the time and really hard, and the other one is neck deep in making sure this one kid's got all his needs met and educational needs met. And then there's this other kid, you got to make sure he's getting all his stuff too. The interpersonal relationships within a family as you are homeschooling can be a minefield if you're not aware of it and you're not taking proactive steps to keep everything on an even keel, basically.
And that kind of brings us actually to the next topic I wanted to ask you about, which is something that I know you talk about. I see it on social media, and I think you've done some different connecting with some parents, but about parent self-care for parents of gifted and twice exceptional kids.
Yeah. It occurred to me several years ago that there's a lot out there for gifted kids and for twice exceptional kids. I mean, if they're in school, they do have the opportunity for things like a 504 or an IEP or, the interventions they need to scaffold them as they grow. And the programs, and there's things out there for the kids. They may be hard to get. They might be wildly expensive. You might have to fight for them really hard, but they exist. But there's nothing out there for their parents. Their parents are doing the heavy lifting. And generally, they're doing the heavy lifting as others are patronizing them, or they're being condescending, or they're being ignored. So these parents are they're shouting into the wind. So what's out there for the parents? And so my goal now is, my kids are getting older and I have more time to think, which is glorious, by the way, is to do more advocacy for the parents because they need it. And what they need most of all is self-care and the awareness that they are not only worthy of it, but that they desperately need it. These kids aren't in standard parenting books, and they're not in standard media of any sort. You have to look special for them. The needs of parents raising these amazing kids are not in your standard self-care book or self-care article. We have differing needs. I mean, when you are dealing with 5 high physics question things at 6:30 in the morning before you've had a cup of coffee, and it goes that way for 14 hours, that's not going to be relieved by a 20-minute bubble bath.
I love that that's the image that everyone gets when they think of self-care. It's like, I'm going to go sit in the bath, and then I'm like, I know. If only.
I don't like baths. It's human soup. I don't want to be human soup. We're all different, just like our kids are all different from other kids, and within the gifted community, every gifted kid in there, our needs are different. So, what I need for self-care is going to be vastly different from what you need for self-care, but we still both need it. And they have a lot in common. I mean, we both have a toolbox and we both have certain kind of tools in there, but my hammer might be pink and bedazzled and yours is a good, solid, sturdy one that's come down through the family. I mean, still a hammer. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I feel about the self-care. We have basic things that we will fill our toolbox with, but they're going to look different. So my big passion is helping the parents figure out that they need that they're worth it, that they have to take the time for it. Because as they do that, they will be able to advocate for their kids better. They'll be able to make it to middle age and older in one piece. I was not so hot with self-care a decade ago. In fact, I was really bad about self-care a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And I've crashed several times, and it's ugly. And it's hard, and it's trying to come back from that. It is mentally and physically and emotionally, spiritually, psychically, everything exhausting to come back when you have crashed because you've pushed yourself too hard and not taken care of yourself.
Parenting is hard. It's not for the faint of heart or for the fragile. In fact, the stress, the long hours, the extra work to pay for it all, the sleepless nights, those things all tend to increase the level of the stress hormone cortisol in your system. Constant higher levels of cortisol have been known to weaken the immune system and raise blood pressure. And that's just from parenting neurotypical kids. Raising gifted and twice exceptional kids can be even more challenging. The struggle just to stay afloat can weaken the strongest people. This is when self-care can be the most critical.
I highly recommend pushing past your comfort zone or your introversion, and I'm talking about myself here, or whatever you need to do, and find others in a similar leaking boat, because we're all in a similar leaking boat trying to bail water the cracked styrofoam cup. I mean, we all are. But when you're with other families that are dealing with something similar, you feel less alone.
Yeah.
And just for starters right there, if you're feeling less alone, that's a relief. The internet has been a great blessing in that respect, because I could count on one hand the number of families I know with gifted kids who would understand. And one of those families is dear friends of ours. We take their kids for the weekend. They take our kids for the weekend. So all of us can get a break. It's the best thing ever. When it comes to self-care, you got to do it. You got to be selfish. You're allowed to be selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I am ordering you to be selfish.
Giving permission.
I am giving you permission. I will sign you a permission slip of, yes, you get to be selfish and take care of you, please. Whatever you need to do, put a sign on your door saying, unless you're on fire, let me have 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a rule in my house. It's blood, bone, vomit, fire, flood, zombie.
Hang on. I need you to do, what is it?
Blood, bone, vomit, fire, flood, zombie.
I think that covers it.
Unless one of those things are actively happening at that moment, you can handle it by yourself while I'm resting. I probably have earplugs in anyway, and the door is closed, and you just leave me alone. I need it. Now, granted, I've got teenage sons now. They are holed up in their room more often than not, so it gets better, parents. It gets better. They do sleep a lot, and you will take vast, perverse glee in waking them up. The child who never slept as an infant now is the teenager who hates to get up in the morning, and oh my God, I still love waking him up. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, take the time for yourself. Please, please, please. You must before you collapse. And that could be something as simple as, going into the bathroom and turning on the exhaust fan and screaming into a towel, because that can help. Screaming into the void can help. When I'm driving, most of the time when I'm driving alone, I'm listening to the glorious sounds of silence. It is the best thing ever.
Right.
No one's talking to me. I'm not listening to anything. I can hear myself think. It's beautiful. It's my favorite sound in the world.
Yeah.
Get yourself a little treat that maybe nobody else in the house likes. I love fancy olives. I love them. Nobody else in the house likes them. So that way, I know they will always be in the fridge. Chocolate that I like, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So get something you like. Also, pro tip, if you buy food that you like, keep an old bag of vegetables, slice it open, put the food in there and hide it in the freezer. Nobody's going to touch the broccoli. I won't tell that you have chocolate hidden in there, but that's the best hiding place ever. Girl Scout cookies, that's where you put them.
I think that's good, because I'm always looking for new spots. I hadn't thought of that one before, so.
Yeah, you slice open a broccoli container in the back.
Yep, it'll last forever.
Pro tip.
Awesome. Well, Jen, thank you so much for your time and talking with us and giving us your reflections and ideas.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great talking to you.
I appreciate the time.
More to come.
If what you hear on Mind Matters makes a difference to you and your family, consider becoming a supporter. Through Patreon.com, you can chip in to help defray the cost of producing this podcast. Just decide how much you'd like to contribute, and that amount will be placed on your credit card every month. Even a couple of bucks would help cover the cost of producing the podcast and help us promote it to new listeners who could also use our help. Go to patreon.com/mindmatters and become a patron. And thanks for making a difference. This is the Mind Matters podcast.
Whether you're parenting or educating gifted or twice exceptional kids, you have to admit, they're exhausting. They're wonderful. They're brilliant and intense. And exhausting. Our guest from today's show, Jen Merrill, wrote this about 2E kids. They're unicorns. Few people believe they exist or only see a rhinoceros. No one can agree on what they need. Because every single one of these rainbow farting unicorns is 100% unique. They are magic when their unusual needs are met. And they have no problem stabbing people with their head if the situation warrants it. Part of our exhaustion as caretakers for gifted and 2E kids is that we question everything we do. Is this the right choice? What if I do the wrong thing? Short of fortune-telling powers, there's no way to know. But remember, in life, there are very few wrong choices. There's a great analogy about self-care that a lot of therapists use. When you're on an airplane and there's a drop in cabin pressure, what are you supposed to do? First, secure your own mask before helping any of those around you. You can't help people if you're passed out due to lack of oxygen. Parenting and teaching is like that too. If you aren't taking care of yourself, you can't take care of everyone else. So, what are you doing to take care of yourself today? I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. See you next time on Mind Matters.
I'm not gonna lose myself. I'll be standing high and I'll win the fight. Not gonna lose myself. And I wanna know, yeah, I wanna know. I could run through the fire, I could conquer the night. If I can make it, if I try to draw the red lights, I could just stay the same or be winning the game. I'll be standing high and I'll win the fight.
A big thanks to Jen Merrill for lending her voice today. You can learn all about her, find her book, and get in touch with her at laughingatchaos.com. While you're surfing, go by our website, mindmatterspodcast.com, and find out what makes us tick. While you're there, you can listen to past episodes. In fact, maybe a Mind Matters binge is in your future. And wherever it is you find us, don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating. The executive producer of Mind Matters is Dave Morris. Our music is by the independent, hard-working musicians represented by Epidemic Sound. We love our patrons at Patreon. If you want to chip in to help us buy coffee for those late-night recording sessions, we're at patreon.com/mindmatters. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Mind Matters is a production of Morris Creative Services.